Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. On December 3rd, 2003, at around 10 p.m., an ordinary Maruti car was driving along a dark road in the city of Bengaluru. Suddenly, the driver heard the terrifying sound of a girl screaming and crying in the darkness. He immediately stopped the car and ran toward the sound, only to witness a scene that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A young man lying on the ground, blood pouring heavily from his head, and beside him stood a girl in shock, screaming for help, but no one could hear her. The place was completely deserted. No pedestrians, no cameras, nothing that could explain what had happened, except blood and silence. They rushed the young man to the nearest hospital, but when the doctors examined him, they said, "His skull is completely fractured, the injury has reached the brain, and his chances of survival are almost non-existent." What makes it even more shocking is that this young man had just gotten engaged a few days earlier. He was planning to get married within months. That night, he had gone out for a simple, romantic dinner with his fiancée. Afterward, they headed to a quiet spot to watch airplanes land in the night sky, something many couples enjoy doing. This wasn't a car accident, and it wasn't a robbery gone wrong, because what happened was deeply strange. Nothing was stolen, not his money, not his phone, not even the jewelry his fiancée was wearing. Just a single, precise blow, in one spot, as if whoever did this came with one purpose only, and then vanished. The young man died the following morning, turning the lives of two entire families upside down in a single night. The police began their investigation, and this case would go on to become one of the most infamous crimes in India's history. But the question that would shake the entire city was this: was the fiancée, who stood beside him and witnessed everything, truly a victim like him, or was she behind everything from the very beginning? Today's story begins in the city of Bengaluru, India, specifically in the Banashankari area, on a street called 23rd Road. In house number 1414 lived a young woman named Shubha Shankaranarayan, around 27 years old. Her father, Shankar Narayana, was a well-known lawyer in the area, highly respected and regarded by everyone around him. Just a few meters away, in house number 1420, lived another respectable family. This family had a young man named Girish, a software engineer working at Intel, around 30 years old. He was very calm and reserved. His life revolved around work and home. He didn't socialize much, and he had no known conflicts or problems with anyone. The two families had been neighbors for years and knew each other very well. In fact, Girish and Shubha had grown up seeing each other since childhood. In October 2003, Shubha's father decided that the time had come for his daughter to get married, especially since she was in her final year at BMS Law College. He chose their neighbor, Girish, a well-educated young man with a stable and respectable job, from a family with a good reputation. He spoke to Girish's family, and the approval came very quickly. Everyone agreed that this was the perfect match anyone could hope for. On November 20th, both families met and agreed on all the details, setting November 30th, 2003 as the engagement date. The engagement did take place in a hall, and it was a big celebration. Many guests, photos, videos, and everything looked perfect. In fact, both families even booked the wedding hall in advance, GNR Kalyana Mandap, and set April 11th, 2004 as the wedding date. Everything seemed calm and smooth. Everyone looked happy, or at least that's what it seemed on the surface. Exactly 3 days after the engagement, on December 3rd, 2003, Shubha was the one who called Girish and asked him out for dinner. It was the first time since their engagement that she had initiated meeting him, so Girish was very happy and immediately agreed. He felt that their relationship was finally starting to grow warmer. That evening, he picked her up on his scooter. First, he took her to his workplace to introduce her to his colleagues, proudly saying with a smile, "This is my fiancée." Then they went to a restaurant called TGIF on Old Airport Road, where they had dinner and talked about their future. They finished around 9:30 p.m. On their way back, as they passed near the airport, Shubha made a somewhat unusual request. She asked him to stop for a while so they could watch the airplanes landing in the darkness. The place was known at the time as Airview Point, located on Indira Nagar, Koramangala Ring Road. It was a popular spot for couples who would go there at night to sit and watch planes take off and land. Girish loved her deeply and never refused her requests, so he parked the scooter by the side of the road in a quiet spot. They both got down and stood together, talking and looking up at the sky. Everything felt like a simple, peaceful moment. Nothing seemed wrong. During the day, the area would be crowded, but at night, it was almost completely deserted. No people, no surveillance cameras. This was 2003, long before cameras became widespread. The silence was heavy, and the distant sound of airplanes landing was the only thing breaking the stillness. While they were standing there, lost in their conversation, a motorcycle suddenly appeared behind them. It stopped briefly, and a person got off, holding something that looked like an iron rod, like the kind used in motorcycle spare parts. Without saying a word, without any warning, he stepped forward and struck Girish with a powerful blow to the head. The first hit landed on the back of his head, followed by a second strike to the left side of his face, so forceful that his body collapsed to the ground instantly, unconscious, as blood quickly began to spread around him. Within seconds, the attacker got back on the motorcycle and sped away at full speed, as if he knew exactly when to arrive, who to strike, and when to disappear. It felt as though this moment had been carefully planned long in advance. Shubha was left standing alone, screaming and crying, with no one around to hear her. The area was completely deserted. She tried to stop passing cars, and after a while she managed to stop a Maruti car. The people inside helped her carry Girish quickly and rushed him to the nearest hospital, Manipal Hospital on Airport Road. As soon as they arrived, doctors took him straight into the operating room and performed a CT scan. But unfortunately, the conclusion was confirmed. His condition was extremely critical, and the chances of saving him were very slim. Both families were informed and rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night. They waited for hours, caught between prayers, fear, and anxious anticipation, until the morning of December 4th, 2003, around 8:30 a.m., when the doctor finally came out of the operating room. Everyone was hoping for a word of reassurance, but the news was devastating. Girish was officially declared dead. The news shattered both families. A groom, who was just months away from his wedding, had suddenly become a lifeless body. The shock was overwhelming for everyone, especially Girish's family. His grandmother, who lived with them in the same house, couldn't comprehend how her grandson, whom she had watched grow up, could be taken away so suddenly. His mother stood outside the ICU door, praying and pleading, waiting for any hopeful update, until the doctor came out and said the words that broke her heart. That same morning, his brother Ramesh, also an engineer working at a major company called Bosch, went with their father to Vivek Nagar police station and filed an official report against an unknown person under Section 302, murder, of the Indian Penal Code. The case was assigned to an officer named K.A. Nanaya, who immediately began investigating. Girish's body was transferred to another hospital, Bowring Hospital, for an autopsy. The report confirmed that the cause of death was the severe blow to the head. From the very beginning, the police faced a major problem. There were no witnesses to the incident except Shubha herself. She told the police that two strangers had come from behind, attacked her fiancé, and fled. She said it was very dark, and she couldn't clearly identify them. But the officer asked himself a simple yet crucial question. If this had been a robbery, why didn't the attacker search for money, phones, or even the gold jewelry Shubha was wearing? It was a single, precise, and fatal attack, targeted at one person only, Girish. What made it even stranger was that Shubha was standing just a few steps away. She could have seen the attacker's face clearly and described him to the police, yet no one tried to harm her or even threaten her into silence. All the focus was solely on eliminating Girish, as if the attacker knew exactly who was supposed to die that night and who was supposed to stay alive to tell the story that had been planned from the beginning. The officer also noticed something else. This entire situation, Girish taking his fiancée out to dinner and then returning, was not something widely known. Only the two families were aware of it, which meant one thing. The killer was either someone from within the family or someone very close to Shubha who knew about the plan in advance and had enough time to prepare and lie in wait. Before the officer reached that hypothesis, he had already explored every possible direction. He questioned Girish's colleagues at work, his neighbors, and his few friends, searching for any past enmity, any workplace conflict, or any disputes in the neighborhood. But everything he found pointed to the same conclusion. Girish was an extremely calm young man with a simple life. He went to work and came back home. He had no issues with anyone, and there was no other relationship in his life besides Shubha. That path led to a dead end, and the officer realized he needed to think in a completely different way. The police decided to collect all the photos and videos from the engagement party. They watched them over and over again, searching for any suspicious movement, from relatives, neighbors, or anyone who had attended. The first time, nothing stood out. Everyone was smiling and everything looked perfectly normal. But the officer wasn't ready to give up. He requested to review the footage again, this time in extreme slow motion, frame by frame. At the exact moment of the ring exchange, he noticed something striking. Shubha, sitting next to her fiancé, didn't look happy at all. There was clear tension on her face. Every time Girish moved closer to her, she subtly leaned away, as if she didn't want to be there in the first place. It was a very strange contradiction on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and it caught the officer's attention in a way he hadn't expected. Another question began to form in his mind. Since Shubha was the only witness, and she was the one who had provided all the details of the story from the very beginning, what guaranteed that her account was even true? If someone knew the details of her personal life more than anyone else, then the investigation should start within her circle, not just Girish's. At that time, mobile phones were still relatively new in India, and the police didn't commonly use call detail records, CDRs, in investigations. In fact, this was almost the first time they considered using them in this way. But the officer felt it was time to try something different. He requested a detailed log of Shubha's calls and messages. When he reviewed the records, one number stood out. It appeared excessively, daily calls and messages, sometimes even hourly, especially during the period after the engagement had been arranged. When they traced the number, it belonged to Arun Verma, a 19-year-old first-year law student at the same college as Shubha. He was younger than her and her junior at the university. A simple question immediately came to the officer's mind. Why would a recently engaged woman be communicating this frequently with a younger classmate? The officer then checked Arun's phone location data at the exact time of the crime and found that his phone was in the same area where the attack had occurred. At the same time, Shubha and Girish were there. This was the first real lead in the case after weeks of investigation with no results. The police immediately summoned Arun Verma for questioning. He walked in with unusual confidence, denied everything, and claimed that he wasn't even in Bengaluru that night, that there must have been some misunderstanding. The officer, whose suspicion had grown very strong by this point, decided to let him go without revealing any evidence, but immediately placed his phone under full surveillance. The very first thing Arun did after stepping out of the station was call Shubha. In a tense voice, he told her that the police had summoned him and asked if they had become suspicious of them. That call, recorded by the police in real time, became definitive proof of collusion between the two, and that they knew things no one should have known if they were truly uninvolved. By January 25, 2004, the police had arrested 4 people: Shubha herself, Arun Verma, his cousin Dinesh, whose real name was Dinakaran, and his friend Venkatesh. This is where the real story began to fully unfold. It turned out that Shubha and Arun had met at the same college and had been in a romantic relationship for quite some time, completely unknown to Shubha's father. They used to meet outside college, spend time together, and their relationship grew so strong that Shubha believed her entire future was with Arun and no one else. When her father discovered the relationship, he was deeply shocked and feared for his reputation and that of the entire family, as he was a well-known lawyer with a respected social standing. He felt he had to shut down the matter by any means before it turned into a scandal. The decision was made quickly: marry her off to their neighbor Girish, the perfect young man no one could object to. Deep down, Shubha was completely against this marriage, but she couldn't refuse her father. She even told a friend, who was helping her with her makeup and henna on the day of the engagement, that after the engagement she would either run away with Arun or kill Girish. But marrying him was something that would never happen, no matter the cost. So Shubha and Arun agreed on a plan. Together, they thought carefully about how to carry it out without raising suspicion. Arun brought his cousin Dinesh into the plan and promised to buy him a mobile phone in exchange for his help, at a time when mobile phones were still rare and considered a symbol of high social status. Then, Dinesh brought his friend Venkatesh into the plan. The 3 of them now knew every detail of December 3rd, from the dinner outing to the exact spot where the couple would stop to watch airplanes, even the type of scooter and the route they would take. The plan was meticulously calculated, and the timing had to be precise, down to the minute. What happened next made it clear that the crime was not random at all. It had been carefully orchestrated. On the day of the incident, Shubha was in constant contact with Arun, sending him messages every so often to tell him exactly where they were and where they were heading. The goal was obvious: to determine the perfect time and place for the attack. Later investigations confirmed that there were numerous calls between them that day, clearly showing that every step had been planned. At the moment of execution, Venkatesh was the one who got off the motorcycle, holding an iron rod from motorcycle spare parts, and delivered the fatal blow to Girish. Afterward, he threw the rod into bushes by the side of the road. As for Arun, he was waiting on the motorcycle. As soon as Venkatesh returned, they sped off, looping back onto the ring road, as if escaping from a scene that had been pre-drawn. Every detail of what happened pointed to the same conclusion. This was not a crime of passion. It was a complete plan, with assigned roles, executed with precise timing down to the second. There was also a small detail, one of the most important elements that completely shifted the course of the investigation. As the police expanded their inquiry, they uncovered something even more critical. The scooter used in the crime had been found at Arun Verma's residence in the Coxtown area. This discovery directly linked the escape vehicle to one of the main suspects. Not only that, but the officer was also able to locate the iron rod used in the attack, discarded in bushes along the roadside, just as the perpetrator had tried to get rid of it quickly. Finding this weapon confirmed the scenario the police had suspected from the beginning. Now the picture was becoming clear. A scooter linked to a known suspect, the murder weapon recovered, and movements that were calculated and pre-planned. All this evidence turned suspicion into certainty. This was no coincidence. Everyone in this story had a specific role, carefully assigned before that night even began. The case was taken to court and charges were filed. Shubha, Arun, and Dinesh were accused of criminal conspiracy under Section 120B and destruction of evidence under Section 201 of Indian law, while Venkatesh was directly charged with murder under Section 302. The trial began in February 2004 at a court called Mayo Hall Court. Shubha, Arun, and Dinesh were released on bail a few months after their arrest, while Venkatesh remained in prison until he was released about 4 years later. The case dragged on in the courts for many years, hearing after hearing without reaching a final verdict. Both families lived through years suspended between hope and despair. Girish's father, unable to bear the shock of losing his son, became increasingly ill as the years passed with no resolution. He died on December 18, 2007, still waiting for a final judgment in his son's case. In a cruel coincidence, the very next day, December 19, 2007, the case was transferred to a specialized fast-track court to be resolved more quickly after years of painful delay. Throughout the trial, the case became a major public concern across Bengaluru. Newspapers and magazines closely followed every hearing, and people discussed it everywhere. It was shocking to many that a young woman from a respectable, educated family could be involved in planning the murder of her fiancé in such a way. It was also one of the first times people saw how new technology, call records, could reveal details that would have been nearly impossible to uncover through traditional investigative methods. On May 17, 2010, after 7 full years since Girish's death, the court delivered its verdict. All 4 accused, Shubha Shankaranarayan, Arun Verma, Dinesh, and Venkatesh, were sentenced to life imprisonment, along with financial fines to be paid to Girish's family. Girish's mother, who had attended every court session for 7 years waiting for justice, felt at that moment that the souls of her son and her husband, who had died waiting for that very day, could finally rest. The Karnataka High Court upheld the verdict in July 2010. Later, Shubha appealed the case to the Supreme Court of India, and in August 2014, she was granted bail until the final decision. The case continued in the corridors of the courts for more than 20 years. Finally, in July 2025, the Supreme Court issued its final ruling, upholding the life sentences for all 4. However, it also allowed them the possibility of applying for clemency within 8 weeks, taking into account the potential for rehabilitation after all those years in prison. For many years, this case remained a classic example studied in criminal investigation lectures in India. It was among the early cases that relied heavily on call records and video analysis as primary evidence, at a time when such technologies were neither widespread nor commonly used in criminal investigations as they are today. A full film inspired by this case was produced in the Kannada film industry, and the case stayed alive in the public memory of Bengaluru for 2 entire decades. Interestingly, the story resurfaced strongly in recent years when a similar case occurred, about a bride who killed her newlywed husband during their honeymoon in Meghalaya. Many people drew comparisons between the two cases due to the shared theme of a relationship that began with joy but ended in a carefully planned crime from within the home. But one question has lingered in many minds to this day. If Shubha had refused the marriage from the beginning and told her father she loved someone else, would Girish still be alive? Unfortunately, no one will ever know the answer. What we do know is that a single decision, made in a moment of fear and concern over societal judgment, destroyed 2 entire families, took the life of a young man who was just beginning to dream of a new future, and also stole the youth of others who spent their lives in prison for a decision that never should have been made. And with that, we come to the end of today's episode. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.